These machines were built to fight the Soviets. Instead, they ended up over the deserts of Kuwait and Iraq. Here is every aircraft that flew during the Gulf War.
Starting with fighters and interceptors.
The F-15 Eagle. This was the king of the sky during Desert Storm. It shot down 33 Iraqi aircraft and never lost a single dogfight. The F-16 Fighting Falcon, the workhorse of the coalition. It flew more missions than any other fighter, hitting airfields, bridges, and supply lines across Iraq every single day. The F-14 Tomcat. Launched from aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, its radar could track targets from very long distances. It also carried bombs when needed. The F/A-18 Hornet. On the very first night of the war, one Navy pilot shot down 2 Iraqi jets and then kept going to hit his target. That one flight tells you everything about this aircraft. MiG-29, Iraq's best fighter in 1991. It looked good on paper but was completely outmatched. Coalition pilots and their superior electronics destroyed them within days.
Next is MiG-25, Iraq's fastest aircraft. It scored the only confirmed Iraqi air-to-air kill of the entire war, shooting down a US Navy jet during a high-speed pass, MiG-23. Iraq used this swing-wing jet to challenge coalition aircraft. Every single one that took off faced odds it could not overcome. MiG-21, a 1950s design, still flying in Iraqi colors in 1991, coalition fighters destroyed every one they encountered without difficulty. Next is Mirage F-1. The most unusual aircraft story of the war, Iraq flew this French jet against the coalition. At the same time, France flew the exact same jet alongside the coalition against Iraq. Mirage 2000, France's modern delta-wing fighter. It flew air defense and escort missions as coalition forces pushed through southern Iraq. Next is F-5 Tiger II. Saudi Arabia flew this lightweight jet throughout the war in ground attack and support roles, working alongside far more advanced coalition aircraft, the Panavia Tornado ADV. The Royal Air Force and Saudi Arabia flew this long-range interceptor to protect the skies over the Gulf throughout the entire air campaign. The Chengdu J-7. China sold Iraq this copy of the MiG-21 before the war. Coalition electronic warfare made it useless from day one. The Shenyang J-6. Another Chinese aircraft in Iraqi service, obsolete by 1991. Most were destroyed on the ground before any pilot could even attempt to fly one. Next is A-10, Thunderbolt II. The Gulf War made this aircraft famous forever. It destroyed more Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles than anything else during the 100-hour ground campaign. Next is F-117 Nighthawk, the war's most important aircraft. On the opening night, it flew into central Baghdad completely undetected, while every other aircraft needed heavy support just to survive. The F-111 Aardvark. Flying from Saudi Arabia, this long-range bomber used precision weapons to destroy hardened bunkers and underground command centers that other aircraft could not reach. Next is F-15E Strike Eagle. Its main job during the Gulf War was hunting Iraqi Scud missile launchers at night across the western desert before they could fire at Israel or Saudi Arabia. The Panavia Tornado IDS. British and coalition Tornadoes flew the most dangerous missions of the early war, coming in low to destroy Iraqi runways. They took the highest losses of any coalition aircraft type. Next is A-6 Intruder. This all-weather bomber flew from aircraft carriers at night and in bad weather, hitting targets that grounded almost every other aircraft in the coalition.
The AV-8B Harrier II. Marines flew this jump jet from forward desert positions, close enough to the front line to respond within minutes when ground troops called for air support. The Seppicat Jaguar. British and French Jaguars flew hundreds of strike missions. The British aircraft got upgraded systems specifically because of what this war demanded. A-7 Corsair II. The Gulf War was its final combat deployment. After decades of service, this veteran attack jet flew its last war missions over Iraq before being retired. The Blackburn Buccaneer. Pulled out of retirement specifically for this war. The RAF needed an aircraft that could aim laser-guided bombs for the Tornado fleet. Next is Sukhoi Su-24. Most Iraqi crews chose to fly these to Iran rather than face the coalition. Iran kept the aircraft and never gave them back. Sukhoi Su-25. Iraq's dedicated ground attack aircraft designed for exactly this kind of close-in fighting. Coalition air power stopped it from doing anything meaningful. Sukhoi Su-22. Iraq flew this swing-wing attack jet, but operations were nearly impossible under constant coalition pressure. Many pilots defected to Iran. The Sukhoi Su-7. An old Soviet ground attack aircraft still sitting in Iraqi inventory in 1991. Most were destroyed on the ground during the coalition's airfield campaign. Next is Douglas A-4 Skyhawk. Kuwait flew these jets from Saudi bases after Iraq destroyed Kuwaiti airfields. Kuwaiti pilots flew combat missions over their own occupied country. AC-130 Spectre. Special Operations Forces relied on this gunship every night. It hunted Iraqi ground units in the dark using sensors that made nighttime completely irrelevant. Aero L-39 Albatross. Iraq pressed this Czechoslovak trainer into light attack duties out of desperation. Flying combat missions in a trainer under coalition air supremacy was an extremely dangerous job. Grumman OV-10 Bronco. Marine controllers flew this propeller aircraft low over Kuwait, marking targets for strike aircraft and guiding the advance during the ground campaign.
Now let's talk about bombers. The B-52 Stratofortress. Flying from Diego Garcia, thousands of miles away, this bomber dropped more total bombs during Desert Storm than any other single aircraft type in the entire coalition. Tupolev Tu-16, a Soviet bomber from the 1950s, still serving Iraq in 1991. Coalition airstrikes destroyed most on the ground before they could fly a single mission. Next is Tupolev Tu-22, Iraq's supersonic bomber. Maintenance problems and coalition pressure kept it almost entirely out of the war. The Xi'an H-6. China supplied Iraq with this bomber before the war. Coalition air supremacy made flying it a death sentence from the very first day. Now let's talk about reconnaissance and electronic warfare. The F-4 Phantom II converted into a radar hunter for this war. It fired anti-radiation missiles at Iraqi air defense sites, systematically dismantling the entire Iraqi radar network from night one. Next is EA-6B Prowler. Every major coalition strike package included one of these. Its jamming systems shut down Iraqi radar long enough for strike aircraft to get in, hit their targets, and get out. The EF-111A Raven. This aircraft flew ahead of the strike packages into Iraqi airspace, jamming air defense radars and creating safe corridors for the bombers behind it. The Grumman OV-1 Mohawk. Army intelligence units flew this sensor-equipped turboprop along the Iraqi border before the ground war, tracking armored unit movements to support coalition planning. The Dassault Falcon 20. Modified for electronic warfare, this business jet performed specialized technical missions that supported the wider coalition electronic campaign over Iraq. EP-3 Ares.
This naval signals intelligence aircraft monitored Iraqi military communications throughout the entire Gulf War buildup and provided targeting intelligence for coalition strikes.
Now, let's talk about airborne command, control, and maritime patrol. The E-3 Sentry, the air traffic manager of the entire war. It tracked every coalition and Iraqi aircraft across the whole theater and directed every significant air-to-air engagement. The E-2 Hawkeye, operating from carriers in the Persian Gulf, it managed the air picture over the battle area and directed coalition fighters toward incoming Iraqi aircraft. Next is E-8 Joint Stars. This aircraft was still being tested when Iraq invaded Kuwait. It was rushed to the Gulf and tracked Iraqi Republican Guard ground movements in real time. The P-3 Orion patrolled the Persian Gulf throughout the war, tracking Iraqi naval movements and helping coalition warships locate and destroy the Iraqi surface fleet. Next is Hawker Siddeley Nimrod. The RAF deployed this maritime patrol aircraft to watch Iraqi naval activity and coordinate British naval operations throughout Desert Storm. S-3 Viking. Originally built to hunt submarines, it spent the Gulf War watching surface shipping and conducting strikes against Iraqi naval targets. Now, let's talk about transports and tankers. The C-130 Hercules, the tactical backbone of the entire operation. It supplied forward bases, dropped supplies by air, and moved troops throughout every phase of the war. The C-141 Starlifter. 500,000 coalition troops were moved to Saudi Arabia in just a few months. This long-range transport is what made that deployment physically possible. The C-17, being evaluated during this period with lessons from Desert Shield directly influencing its final development. Handley Page Victor, converted from a bomber decades earlier, this aircraft refueled RAF Tornadoes throughout Desert Storm in what turned out to be its final operational deployment ever. C-2 Greyhound, this small carrier delivery aircraft kept the Persian Gulf battle groups supplied throughout the war, flying critical parts and personnel to ships that could not leave their position. Next is C-9 Nightingale. This dedicated medical evacuation aircraft moved wounded coalition personnel from Gulf War field hospitals to proper medical facilities in Europe and the United States. The C-12 Huron, a light utility aircraft used to move commanders and priority cargo between the dozens of coalition bases spread across Saudi Arabia. Next is Antonov An-12, Iraq's main heavy transport before the war. Coalition airstrikes grounded the entire fleet early on. The Antonov An-26. Iraq used this Soviet tactical transport for moving supplies between bases before Desert Storm. Coalition attacks on Iraqi airfields shut it down quickly. Next is Ilyushin 1L-76. Iraq operated large numbers of these Soviet cargo jets. Most fled to Iran or were destroyed by coalition strikes on Iraqi airfields. Now, let's talk about helicopters. AH-64 Apache. The Gulf War opened with this helicopter. On the very first night, Apaches destroyed Iraqi radar sites in complete darkness, opening the corridor for the entire air campaign that followed. Next is AH-1 Cobra. Marine attack helicopter crews flew these against Iraqi armor during the ground campaign, helping Marines punch through Kuwait's defensive lines. UH-60 Blackhawk, the primary U.S. Army transport helicopter throughout the war. It moved infantry and special operations forces across southern Iraq during the famous flanking ground campaign. The CH-47 Chinook, the massive left hook that flanked Iraqi forces, only worked because of this helicopter. It moved artillery, fuel, and ammunition forward faster than any ground vehicle could. Next is MH-53 Pave Low. On the opening night of the war, this special operations helicopter guided Army Apaches to the Iraqi radar sites that had to be destroyed first before anything else could happen. CH-53 Sea Stallion. The largest helicopter in the Marine Corps during Desert Storm,
It conducted combat search and rescue and moved heavy equipment throughout the ground campaign. The OH-58 Kiowa. Army scout crews used this small helicopter to find hidden Iraqi positions and then direct Apache attack helicopters onto targets that could not be spotted from higher altitude. Next is SH-60 Seahawk. The main U.S. Navy helicopter during the war, it flew anti-submarine patrols, watched surface traffic, and conducted search and rescue across the Persian Gulf. The UH-1 Iroquois. Still flying decades after Vietnam, during Desert Storm, it moved commanders and performed medical evacuation duties throughout the ground campaign. The Westland Lynx. Royal Navy crews used this helicopter to attack and destroy Iraqi patrol boats in the northern Persian Gulf, removing the Iraqi naval threat to coalition warships. Next is Westland Sea King. British forces used this helicopter for troop transport, search and rescue, and airborne early warning throughout both the naval and ground phases of the war. Aerospatiale Gazelle. French and British forces used this scout helicopter to locate Iraqi positions and guide ground forces during the 100-hour liberation of Kuwait. Aerospatiale Puma. Multiple coalition nations used this medium transport helicopter to move troops and supplies during the ground push through southern Iraq.